I tried to keep peace with my dad and Cynthia, his wife, for most of my adult life. She married my dad while I was in my early teens, and since then, she has made it her goal to oversee every holiday, birthday, or party our family hosts. Cynthia enjoys taking the stage and running under direction. Though my dad always said it made her feel involved, I always felt she simply wanted to run the show. I followed it since I love my dad, but after what occurred, I can't longer. Let me set the scene. Rachel, my fiancée, is 26 while I am 28. We have been together for some years and are raising 2 children. One is our hyperactive toddler son, Caleb, and the other is Luke, Rachel's younger half-brother, 4. A few years ago when their parents died, Rachel adopted Luke. Though he calls me by my name, he is to us like a son. We love him very much, but Cynthia? From the time Rachel and I started planning our wedding, Cynthia insisted on controlling everything. She came up uninvited at dress calls, contacted our wedding planner without authorization, and even tried to propose venue and guest list modifications. It wore me out. Though we set limits that Cynthia repeatedly disregarded, my dad kept urging me to humor her. Rachel and I had something to go to a couple of Sundays ago. Her brother often watches the children, but he was out of town. We requested her dad to watch since her other siblings lived too far away, and my mom was not accessible. Though we hadn't expected Cynthia to cause any trouble, we had not planned for her to be there. We returned home to anarchy. My dad looked completely hopeless. Caleb and Luke were both crying. Cynthia was shouting. Being the nice and gregarious child he is, Luke had informed Cynthia that Caleb and he would be ring bearers for our wedding. Cynthia passed out. Telling him he was not family and had no right to be included in our wedding, she screamed at him. She became aggressive enough to crack his lip when he shed tears. When Rachel whisked the children upstairs to cool them down, I frozen. I urged Cynthia to get out of my house. She argued, but I was no longer paying attention. I informed her I wanted her away from my family once more, and she was banned from the wedding. In the days that followed, my dad was in full damage control mode. My dad tried to negotiate, but I was clear. If Cynthia was present, he was not welcome either. He called every family member he could, whirling the narrative to give it the impression that Rachel and I had overreacted to a little conflict. He deftly omitted the scene in which Cynthia physically injured Luke. Among my relatives, several of them agreed with him, including my stepbrother, who stands up for Cynthia no matter what. But Rachel's family, along with most of my dad's side, stood squarely with us. Rachel and I decided to file charges. Luke saw the pediatrician the day following the event to have his injuries recorded. By chance, our nanny cam recorded Cynthia yelling and Luke crying. Although the physical attack was not captured on camera, Cynthia now has a child abuse charge on her record since the audio alone was damning. We reported to the police. Still reeling from all of this is me. Still downplaying what happened, my dad insists Cynthia didn't intend to damage Luke. For myself, though, that is not important. She crossed a line. There is no undoing. A few folks I know suggest Cynthia might have acted out of a lack of inclusion. Perhaps Rachel's family, who have welcomed both Luke and me with wide arms, makes her feel inadequate. But you know what? Rachel and I are concentrating on looking out for our children and one another. This is not my concern. Though I adore my dad, I'm done if keeping in touch with him means exposing my family to Cynthia's poison. Luke is attending a counselor already, and we are especially kind and attentive to him. Though I would never pardon myself for not seeing this approaching, this is simply the beginning of the repercussions. He is a strong child. Though there is so much more to investigate, for now I am appreciative of the love and encouragement Rachel and the family we have created provide. Whatever comes next will be experienced by us jointly. I was still hurting from the consequences after Cynthia was kicked from our house and our marriage. Though Luke's damaged lip was healing, emotional harm persisted. Usually silent, he stayed near Rachel and me. That child is strong, but watching someone he thought of as family break like that had rocked him. Though he lacked the words to express it, I could tell he was afraid. Rachel and I had to gently explain to him that my dad and Cynthia would not be visiting anymore. Though Caleb is too little to notice, Luke probes a number of issues. Does it follow that Grandpa no longer loves me? One evening, he inquired, clutching his Superman blanket. My chest tightened under my control. Of course not, friend, I said. Grandpa values you. He merely… Rachel said, her voice calm but firm. We cannot let poor decisions damage our family. Luke, you are really adored. By Caleb, by us, by everybody that counts. That never changes. He nodded, but I could see the gears working in his head. Children experience things more profoundly than we would provide credit for. My dad was occupied with damage control for the rest of the family while we were focused on healing. Word of Rachel and I's barring of Cynthia from the wedding quickly got out there. Dad purposefully omitted the specifics of what Cynthia had done, painting our response as a minor overreaction. She was just unhappy, he informed them. It was a misunderstanding. An understandable one? She cracked my child's lip. Some of them found it effective, though. Adam, my stepbrother, answered angrily and defensively among the first to call. Do you honestly believe Mom would harm a child? He demanded. I moved without thinking at all. I do not think it, Adam. I know it. We have data. He hung up on me before I could say another word. The family broke into two camps rather rapidly. Those who listened to us, and others who believed my dad's version of events. A few of my cousins and aunts were as firm in their support as Rachel's family was, but my dad had persuaded some of the older relatives as well as others that we were exaggerating. One of my uncles informed me, she's your stepmother. Family is family. You do not discard people like that. I told him straight. Family shields one another. He had little to say after that. Rachel and I agreed early on that we wouldn't allow Cynthia to get away with what she did. They neither harm children nor demand pardon just because of a title. We visited the pediatrician the day following the incident to record Luke's damage. We also went over the nanny cam tape, which showed plenty of Luke sobbing and her shouting to demonstrate her behavior was beyond reasonable. Although the physical attack was not captured on camera, we had enough evidence to file charges against Cynthia for child abuse. She was formally charged with such. Though it was not a serious felony, it was on her record now, which provided some solace. Still, the entire procedure sapped me. Unsurprisingly, my dad sided with her, downplaying everything and downplaying the seriousness of what happened. I'm not saying anything was okay, he told me over the phone one night, but she was simply upset. You know how she gets. I found what I was hearing unbelievable. No, Dad, I retorted. This is not about her sentiments. This relates to her treatment of a 4-year-old. To my child. He sighed, as if I were the irrational one. You're blowing this out of proportion. That was it for me. You know she loves you. If she loved me, she would respect my family, and she sure as heck wouldn't hurt Luke. I hung up after that and haven't seen him since. Those weeks, Rachel and I leaned on one another. Though I could see how much this was stressing her as well, she was my rock. In her life, she has gone through a lot. Lost her parents, volunteered to raise Luke. But this represented still another degree of betrayal. One evening, as we sat on the couch after putting the children to bed, I apologized to her. I should have seen this approaching. She grasped my hand, her hold strong. I should have shielded the lads and you. You are not at fault here. You were ignorant. And what counts today is that we are acting in the necessary ways to safeguard them. You make a nice spouse and a good dad. Hearing her say that was like a lifeline. Do not let anyone persuade you otherwise. Though not yet completely believed it, I kept her words like a lighthouse amid a storm. Rachel's family acted in ways I will never forget. Mark, her older brother, volunteered to keep an eye on the children any time we needed, and her mother called practically daily to follow up. Her extended relatives, who live outside of the state, also contacted to provide encouragement. Whereas my family was a shambles, Luke had been welcomed as one of their own from the beginning, and they were not about to let this change. Among the few on my side were my sister Laura. She told our dad straightforwardly, enraged with him for standing up for Cynthia. You're choosing her over your own grandkids, she said on one explosive phone call. Most of my cousins were helpful but reluctant to become involved. If you can't understand how terrible it is, then I'm not sure what to say to you. We believe you, one of them assured me, but you know how Uncle Mike is. The hardest thing was realizing my dad would never put us first. He is not changing. Growing up, he had always been a wonderful father for Laura and me. Nevertheless, Cynthia had him around her finger. And now that loyalty was souring his relationship with us. After a few weeks, Luke began to recover. Rachel and I made sure he felt loved every single day. His counselor helped him sort through what occurred. Laughing and playing like nothing has ever happened, he is back running about the house wearing his Superman cape. Every now and then, though, I find him staring over his shoulder as though he is verifying Cynthia's absence. Rachel and I choose to turn our attention toward the future, which hurts. We were resolved not to let this catastrophe define our happiness, while our wedding was still under progress. We shared pictures of Cynthia and my dad, just in case they tried to come up uninvited and changed our venue, and vendors regarding the matter. We were not risking anything. Regarding my dad, I love him. But I have realized that his allegiance to Cynthia comes with a price. I'm done paying that if that payment represents the safety and happiness for my family. The weeks following my severance from my dad and Cynthia were quiet but underlined with anxiety. Everything felt quite still, like the peace following a storm, yet you knew the damage had been done. Rachel and I were preoccupied with the wedding. Luke was gently returning to himself. Caleb was blissfully ignorant. Even in the calm times, though, the weight of it all persisted. It was difficult to accept that my dad, the man who reared me, was ready to give Cynthia his connection with my family sacrificed. I kept going over our last talk in my mind, his apologies for her sounding like a broken record. I wanted to scream every time I thought about it. She didn't mean it. She's just wounded. She loves you. How could he miss what she had done? Rather than moping about it, though, I focused on ensuring Rachel and the children felt loved and safe. They deserved my whole attention, and I was not going to let the treachery of my dad steal that from them. Even when I cut off touch with my dad, family conflict did not stop there. Two competing stories grabbed my cousins, aunts, and uncles in their crossfire. Claiming we had overdone everything, my dad had cast Cynthia as the victim. Rachel and I, on the other hand, had made it plain what had happened. Cynthia verbally abused Luke over something as minor as being a ring bearer and physically harmed him. Some cousins believed us right away. Some others? Not so much. My Aunt Sylvia, who had always been near my dad, called me. Her tone was accusing. "I don't understand why you're shutting him out," she added. "Your dad thinks highly of you. Over this, he is devastated." I inhaled deeply. "Sylvia, he might love me, but he sure as hell isn't behaving like it. Cynthia injured my child and he is helping her. I draw the line there." "Kids are resilient," she said dismissively. "Luke is going to be good. That did it. You are hurting your dad for something not even his responsibility." I watched him stand there and let it happen. He decided on her instead of us. I hung up before she could reply. "Maybe you too don't belong in our life if you can't see why I should be protecting my family." I had to have that conversation before, and it wouldn't be the last one either. Some people supported and knew about us. Others hung on the concept of family loyalty, regardless of the expenses. But loyalty has restrictions for me. It pauses where my children's safety starts. Luke's resilience blesses his small heart. He was bouncing back faster than I could have predicted. His damaged lip was healing, and his counselor was boosting his confidence quite successfully. One night he came up to me with a crayon drawing he had painstakingly created. He began asking to play outside more, racing around in his Superman cape, and even drawing pictures of our family. Myself, Rachel, Caleb, and him, all holding hands. He said boldly, pointing to every figure, "This is us, and this is Grandpa." He drew my dad standing far away, with a sad expression and tears running down his cheeks. "Why's Grandpa upset?" Trying to keep my voice calm, I said gently. "Because he doesn't get to be with us anymore," Luke stated matter-of-factly. "Nevertheless, it's good. We're still pleased." I gave him a deep hug and felt both pride and heartache. Though he was too young to handle these adult issues, he had somehow come to terms with them in a way I hadn't yet seen. When my dad tried to get in touch once more, everything boiled down. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, but one night my phone buzzed with a protracted, ranting text. He began with the standard, how much he missed me, how family is everything, how I was separating us by not forgiving Cynthia. Then he said something that set me ablaze. Cynthia's gone through so much. You have no idea how difficult it is for her to fit in with our family. You are excluding her. She is doing her best. That was it. You are the one acting irrationally. I had done. Not thinking about the late hour, I called him. You think Cynthia's the victim here? When he picked up, I hardly gave him a chance to talk. With trembling in my voice, I said, she chastised my son. She made him feel as though he belonged nowhere. You let her too. You allowed her in. Now you want me to pardon her since her emotions are damaged? Are you listening to yourself at all? He said, son, it's not that simple, but I wasn't having it. No, Dad, that's exactly that. You have picked her above your grandkids and even your family, and if that is the decision you are making, you have to live with it. But you dare try to make me guilty into allowing her back into our life? Not after what she has done. He remained quiet for some time. Quietly he said, I love you. I answered, my throat hard, I love you too. I hung up, and that was the last time we spoke. I can't do this anymore. Rachel was waiting for me when I returned to the living room. Her eyes betrayed concern. What transpired? She questioned. I dropped onto the couch next to her, letting the weight of the talk descend over me. It's over, I stated simply. She put her arms around me, and for the first time in weeks I allowed myself to weep. I'm done trying with him. Not only for Luke, but also for Caleb, for Rachel, for the family we were developing as well as the one we lost. When the tears stopped, I felt lighter. I sobbed for the man I would have become as well as for the dad I used to know, the one who would have moved heaven and earth to guard his children. I seemed to be able to breathe for the first time. My dad made his decisions. I no longer had to bear their weight. They were his own. I had my family, my true family, and they were all I needed. Rachel and I poured ourselves into wedding planning while my dad formally disappeared from view. At first, it felt both contradictory. I always pictured my dad strolling about with the pleased smile he used to have, maybe toasting his knowledge from the minute I was born that I would grow into a guy who would find a love like this. But either he never existed, or that version of him vanished from view. Rachel, as always, was my rock. I was learning to let go of that fantasy, even though it hurt. Notwithstanding all, she devoted her time to organizing a celebration of love, family, and strength that would really reflect us. One evening, as we sat on the couch surrounded by lists and seating charts, she observed, "This wedding isn't just for us. It also pertains to Luke and Caleb." Her comments really stayed with me as I want them to see what true family looks like. It changed from simply us now. It related to the family we were creating and the future we hoped for our children. So we set to work with fresh emphasis. Our guest list clearly showed damage from the fallout with Cynthia and my dad. At first it ached since several of my cousins, aunts, and uncles chose not to come either, because they thought my dad's version of events or because they didn't want to choose sides. These were folks I knew from growing up, folks I could rely on. If they can't support us when we're doing what's right for our family, do you really want them there? Rachel asked, noting that their absence wasn't always a loss. She begged. She was correct, naturally, but it made no difference. Conversely, Rachel's family pulled together around us like never before. Mark, her older brother, volunteered to assist with last-minute chores. Her mother started to be our unofficial cheerleader, calling practically every day to check on us. Even Rachel's extended family, some of whom I had only seen a few times, were anxious to celebrate with us. Their encouragement healed the hurts my side of the family had inflicted. Luke's enthusiasm about becoming a ring bearer was among the pleasures of the wedding preparation. He had been training, strolling down the corridor carrying a cushion, puffing out his chest like a small superhero on a mission. His eyes filled with expectation, he inquired one evening, "Am I going to be the best ring bearer ever?" "The best," I said, combing his hair. Nobody else I would rather have up there. Even asking Rachel to assist him in rehearsing his serious face for the big day. He took his job very seriously. Seeing him made my chest warm, unlike what I had felt in weeks. Seeing him happy made all we had gone through seem worthwhile. He was mending in his own sense. The shadow of Cynthia lingered over us even as we tried to go forward. Rachel and I had worked to make sure she wouldn't wreck the wedding. We had shown her picture to the venue and made it abundantly apparent she was unwelcome. Additionally included on the list in case was my dad's picture. We were not indulging in any risk. Mark jokingly said he would play bouncer should need, and promised to keep an eye on the wedding day. Grinning, he replied, "Nobody's messing with my little sister's big day." We needed his lightheartedness perfectly to help to relax some of the stress. The anarchy started to calm as the wedding date drew near. Vendors verified, the dress fit, and the last touches were falling together. Rachel and I could breathe for the first time in many months. More evenings were spent simply sitting together, discussing the future, and fantasizing about what life might hold following the wedding. Rachel turned to me one night while we were sleeping, her hand barely resting on my chest. "Do you think he'll ever come around?" she inquired gently, her voice tinged with grief. I knew the person she meant. "I have no idea," I said. "Though I'm not holding my breath, I wish I could believe he will. Should he ever do, it will take far more than a simple apology." She nodded with glitter in her eyes. "That he's missing this bothers me. Not for us, but for the youngsters. They belong better." I nodded, drawing her closer, and said, "They do. We can, however, provide them better. Already we are. My sister Laura called me unexpectedly the evening before the wedding. Her constant dedication had been a lifesaver. She had been the only member of my family to totally support us. She said, "Hey," her voice unsure, "Dad has been asking about you. You should know about this. Trying to get me to talk to you. He has been calling me practically every day. What's he saying?" I asked, my stomach getting tight. "The same as in past years. That he misses you, that Cynthia is sad, that you are splitting the family apart. Still, he is not grasping it. He should apologize," I urged him, "but he keeps coming up with justifications." I sighed, the weight of everything once more pushing down on me. "I appreciate you sharing with me, but right now I cannot deal with him. Rachel and the kids will be here tomorrow, not him." "I know," she remarked softly. "I just wanted you to be informed. You know, I'm rather proud of you. For your groundwork, her comments meant more than what I could express." "Thanks, Laura. That is a lot." I became depressed for what could have been as I hung up. But I also owed a great deal of thanks for Laura, for Rachel, and for the family we were building. There was going to be celebration tomorrow. Nothing was going to rob us of that. The morning the wedding took place seemed strange. As though it knew we needed this day to be perfect, the sun rose into a brilliant blue sky. Although in different locations, Rachel and I got up early. The night before, she had remained at her mother's house following a minor custom her family insisted on to maintain the first look mystique. Caleb babbling in his cot and Luke tugging at my sleeve woke me up, his face lighting up before I could respond. "Is today the day?" he inquired. Scooping him up, I exclaimed, "It's the day, buddy. You ready to be the greatest ring-bearer ever?" He nodded gravely, his chest puffing up as usual when he felt good about himself. Super ready. The air was charged with contagious enthusiasm. Laura, my sister, arrived early to assist in child wrangling and schedule keeping. She teased me often, but it was her means of grounding me. As she changed my tie, she inquired, "You nervous?" "Nah," I answered with a smile. "Just intrigued. Rachel is the one. Always the one has she been." Laura gave a little gentle smile. "Good," said, "you belong here. Neither of you does." The location was really amazing. Rachel and I had decided on a garden scene with gentle blossoms around tall trees. It was calm, intimate in a way that made it abundantly evident this was about us and the folks who really counted. My heart raced as I stood at the altar awaiting Rachel, but not from anxiety. It was pure delight, the sort you hardly experience in daily life. Carrying the rings with the austere concentration of a small superhero on a mission, Luke first marched down the rows. Holding Laura's hand and smiled for the audience, Caleb toddled after him. Both of them wore identical small suits, and I could hear the visitors laughing at how cute they looked. Then Rachel showed up, and the universe seemed to stop. She was brilliant. Her dress hung about her like a dream. Mark, her older brother, walked her down the aisle, and I could tell he felt great to be at her side. All else vanished when her eyes locked with mine. Only we were doing though basic. The ceremony exuded affection. Rachel's eyes sparkled with tears as I recited my own vows, which we had written. You have shown me what it means to love fiercely, to fight for family, and to never give up. I have found my home with you, and always I promise to guard it. Though her vows were equally poignant, what stayed with me most was when she stated, You've given me a love I never thought I would have, and together we've built a family stronger than anything. The thunderous cheers from our friends and relatives when we were announced husband and wife. Caleb clapped his overweight hands while Luke gave out a tiny yell. Everything was perfectly as it ought to be for the first time in what seemed to be eternity. The event was a haze of laughter, dance, and never-ending food platters. Rachel's family contributed a degree of warmth and excitement that made the whole day seem amazing. Even the older relatives who lacked dancing moved in their chairs, grinning as the music turned on the dance floor. Luke was a hit, whirling about in his Superman cape, which he had insisted on wearing after dinner. Not to be outdone, Caleb followed him laughing as he struggled to keep up. Seeing them together helped me to understand why we had battled so fiercely to keep our family intact. The presentations during the evening were among its highlights. Of course, Laura brought the house down with her blend of tender memories and polite mocking. I have known my brother my whole life, she remarked, smiling at me. And he seems to be happiest when he is with Rachel. We all benefit from her turning him into a better man. Even Mark, Rachel's brother, got involved in the activity. Raising his glass, he exclaimed, Welcome to the family. We love strongly, we are a little dirty and loud, and right now among us is your friend. The day was overwhelmingly joyful, yet in the background lurked a shadow. Naturally absent were my dad and Cynthia, but their absence was felt in subdued ways. A handful of my cousins who had sided with them disappeared, and the empty chairs served as a subdued reminder of the family I had lost in the course of defending my own. Laura spotted me fixed on one of the vacant chairs throughout dinner. She slanted over and pushed me. She remarked gently, Hey, don't let them sour this for you. Look about. Your family currently consists of this. She pointed out the right thing. I had Rachel, the children, and those who had regularly turned up for us without question. All that really counted was that. My chest started to weigh less as the evening went on. Laughing and hiding kisses between songs, Rachel and I danced until our feet hurt. Still holding his Superman cape, Luke dozed out on a couch in the corner while Caleb nodded off in Rachel's mother's arms. Rachel and I went away for a minute alone before the evening was over. Holding hands and watching the visitors have fun under the string lights, we stood. We did it, she remarked, her voice softly amazed. Yes, I replied, drawing her near. We truly did. I was at peace for the first time in many months. Though it wasn't finished, the conflict between my dad and Cynthia didn't really matter. At that instant, the woman next to me and the life we were creating together were all I gave any thought. This was our new beginning. Nothing was going to rob us of. The days following the wedding seemed like awakening from the finest dream of your life and knowing it was true. Officially husband and wife, Rachel and I felt new even if the world had not changed. The love we had, the family we had created, all felt more robust, more unquestionable. Just a few hours from our house, we honeymooned in a peaceful cabin close to a lake. It was ideal for us, not ostentatious. The mornings were spent drinking coffee on the terrace while the mist rolled off the water. The afternoons were occupied with lengthy walks and future-oriented discussions. Not once, either. We mentioned my dad or Cynthia. This time was only for us. While we were away, Luke and Caleb remained with Rachel's brother, Mark. Mark sent images of the lads lounging on the couch or playing in the backyard to us. Naturally, Luke donned his Superman cape practically in every picture. Seeing them content, even from a distance, gave me comfort knowing we were acting morally. Returning home felt as though one were entering a fresh chapter. The house was the same. The routines were the same. However, something had changed. We were steady, one together, The anarchy of the last 6 months had strengthened rather than broken us. Luke likewise seemed to detect the shift. He focused on school, his friends, and, naturally, being a big brother to Caleb, asking fewer questions about my dad and Cynthia. Luke climbed onto the couch next to me one evening carrying a book and watched Rachel put Caleb to bed. "Could we read this together?" he asked. "Naturally," I said, drawing him close. I was astounded as we read of how far we had come. Though he had gone through so much in his brief life, Luke was flourishing, and I came to see then that Cynthia's absence or Dad's approval was not necessary to justify our family. We were plenty, exactly as we were. About 1 month following the wedding, my stepbrother Adam called. It surprised me since I hadn't spoken to him since the incident and wasn't sure I wanted to. But I stopped at something in his voice. He sounded worn out, as though he had been bearing the weight of the globe on his shoulders. "Can we get together?" "I have to speak." Though Rachel warned me to keep my heart under control, she urged me to go. "You owe him nothing," she remarked softly. "But maybe it would be worth listening to him if there is a chance for some sort of healing." A few days later we got together at a coffee shop. Adam looked different, perhaps older, maybe simply tired. He did not waste time chatting casually. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice almost above a whisper. "I do now, but I never believed you before." I looked up an eyebrow. "What changed?" He groaned and ran a hand over his hair. "Mom's been strange from the wedding. She has been snapping at everyone, at me, and when I confronted her about what occurred with Luke, she at last confessed it. She stated it was not a huge deal, but—" He shook his head and broke off his speech. "It's a major deal." I never would have imagined defending her. Trying to understand his remarks, I slanted back in my chair. Part of me wanted to tell him it was too little, too late, and remain furious. Still, another side of me sensed the suffering in his eyes and had a flutter of hope. Perhaps, just barely, this marked the start of something better. "I value your saying that," I said gently, "but you owe an apology to someone else, not me. Rachel and Luke, here it is." "I know," he remarked rapidly. "If they will let me, I want things right with them. Simply put, I'm not sure how." I nodded slowly. "Begin by being sincere. Don't start justifying her anymore, and you have to show them you are ready to put them first if you wish to live with them." It was a step, not a guarantee of reconciliation. And for the first time in a long time, I thought perhaps, even if it was a long and meandering road forward, there was a road forward. Months went by, and life found a different beat. Rachel and I concentrated on raising the boys and daily lavishing our love and energy upon them. Caleb started chatting more, his small voice filling the house with ceaseless inquiries and laughter. As a big brother, Luke kept developing in his capacity to always watch out for Caleb and ensure he felt part of everything. Though we were conversing once more, my relationship with Adam stayed dubious. He had even begun sporadically dining with us, gradually restoring confidence. Rachel was careful but kind. Luke, always the forgiving spirit, appeared glad to see him once more. Regarding my dad since the wedding, I have not spoken to him. Laura informed me he is still attempting to get in touch, but I am not ready. Possibly I never will be ready. Although I will always love him, I can't welcome him back into our lives unless he is ready to make actual adjustments, since I have acknowledged he picked Cynthia above us. That door is closed, at least temporarily. When one looks back, it is difficult to comprehend how much has changed in such a brief period. Though true, the suffering and treachery we went through was only one aspect. Another was the strength we discovered within one another. Rachel and I have raised a family based on love and fortitude rather than blood. Rachel placed her head on my shoulder one evening as we sat on the porch observing the lads in the yard. "Do you think we will ever stop fighting for this?" she questioned. Never comma, I said without thinking twice. "Because it will be worth it. You're valuable. They are really worth it." Her eyes gleamed in the golden light of the lowering sun as she grinned. She mumbled, "I love you." "I love you too," I said, my voice calm and certain. "Always." In that instant, surrounded by the joy of our children and the subdued hum of a life we had battled to preserve, I realized we were precisely where we were supposed to be.